What's up, guys? Karting Kid here again. I'm going to be showing you guys how to do a basic port on V8 cylinder heads. So I've got these heads pulled off of a 98 Ram with a 5.2, and I've started to port the head over here. But before I show you the technique and how I did it, I want to explain some of the basics and the tools you'll need. Cylinder head porting is not something you can just dive into without any experience. You do want to try out a little bit on, maybe small engine heads, or at least do a butt ton of research. Now, for the more basic porter, someone who's doing it at home like I am, you do need to know some of the science, but you don't need to be 100% with valve angle and all that. Again, just to preface, I'm not a professional. This is just how I do it for the average home builder. But there's a few main points you want to remember. Don't take too much off, as this can actually hinder performance versus improve it. Make sure everything is smooth, no bumps or ridges. You want your intake port to still have some roughness in it, so it'll help atomize the fuel as it's going in. And go slow. You really don't want anything to not match. Everything should match between every single port, or you're going to have tuning difficulties. Now, why don't companies do this from the start? Now, your average truck or car from the 90s was not built for massive speed, racing, or performance. It was built to be tough, reliable, and sometimes, in some occasions, they had to make these a certain way in order to stay within emissions laws. Now, unfortunately, with mass production, you will have some casting mistakes, especially because these heads are made from cast iron, steel, so it's not going to be perfect. And typically, if you take your finger or flashlight, you can look down in there and start to see some of the imperfections. For example, on both the intake and the exhaust port, there is a dip, a big kind of canyon in the middle there before it comes back up and gets wider again. That's that way on both heads, and then you have some random bumps and lines of crap in there that you don't really want. So as you can see, it gets very smaller before it gets wider. All that porting in theory is just making things smoother, allowing the air to get around things a little bit easier, making it less turbulent, so you get overall a bit more air in the engine and better airflow out of the engine. Most people, when they're doing this, will use a die grinder, as it's a lot faster, but personally, especially being somewhat of a beginner, I like to use a Dremel, just because, yes, it does take significantly longer, but it allows for a bit more precision, especially if you're doing it for the first time, so you don't actually take off too much or destroy the valve seat just from a minor slip. Now, the exhaust ports, here you can see what I've done on these heads over here. Both the intake and the exhaust you want semi-smooth, but the exhaust needs to be smoother, just so you get less carbon deposits up in there. As you can see, I've gone in there and just smoothed everything out a bit. A lot of people will also match this port to the gasket, so that there's no little bit of distance where the gasket isn't fully seated against the metal. But for this case, I'm just going to leave it and just hit the edges a tiny bit. Once again, I'll reiterate that I'm not a professional, and this is advice really just for the home builder who likes to tinker with stuff like this and isn't looking to make 600 horsepower. But the key to making sure you don't have any bumps, canyons, or ridges is just go smooth and consistent. Instead of going, let's say, in and out, like a lot of people do, you want to go side to side, just in a smooth motion. Once you get the vast majority of the material that you want to get off, whether it's on this side or this side, then you can kind of start going all the way around just to, make sure everything's smooth and there's not too much crap in there. But I'll give you a bit better of a view, sorry for the shaky camera, but right down there you see where it goes from rough to smooth. There's actually a dip, which is causing turbulence and restricting airflow. Same on the intake side, you can see how sharp this little corner is before it dips about 90 degrees off to the other port. So you can smooth out stuff like that, just crap on the walls like that. I will give a quick demonstration of me porting one of these ports on both the intake and exhaust, but the final product will end up looking somewhat like this. You'll have smoother ports less rough edges in terms of like 90-degree angles and all that, and it'll just end up looking a bit more polished than it would otherwise. It also helps if you're working on an older motor and you're trying to get carbon deposits out. While you're doing this, it'll knock all that out. I just use a mounted rock bit on a Dremel, nothing fancy, and run it around the higher end of the speed, just so you can get a bit more pressure on there. When I start, I like to focus on the areas that need it the most. So on this, it would be towards the intake on the exhaust port. And then you just start going back and forth, really smooth, moving in and out, making sure not to stick in one part for an extended period of time. You want to just keep moving. And then once you start getting most of the material shaved off, you can start going around and around and around, making sure not to come up too high and hit this valve seat. I'm assuming you're going to be lapping them anyway, but it just adds a level of annoyance. Wear a mask of some sort so you don't get all this metal crap and dust in your lungs. And when you're going from one side, have a light shining in so you can see, and when you're going from this side, obviously have it coming from the other side. And of course, do a bit of research on your vehicle and see what other people have done for porting. There are a bunch of guys online in the Dodge community who like to work on these little 318s, so I took some advice from them and followed it. Anyways, enough yapping. Let me show you how I port one of these. And if you want to get a bit more in depth with the science behind everything, which I did a bit before dabbling into this, I will link an article down below by Motor Trend where they kind of show some of the things you want to keep in mind. But then again, every motor is different, but the basic is you want smoother airflow and more of it, but not too much. Got my little setup right here. Get a bit of a better view of how there's a lip up on the inside of there. A bit better of a view. You can see how it kind of hooks up. So this part of the valve and above you don't really want to touch, because that's usually cut in a certain way for a reason, but anything below that and just on the edge right here, you'll be alright too. It also depends on the motor, what angles the valves are cut at, whether it's a 3-angle cut or just one. And you can see we got some pretty bad carbon deposits back there. Either that or it's crappy casting, but start going at it. So as you can see, we've started to move a bit of material. I have this edge is relatively straight, so when I have it angled, I know there's a dip right in there. Not only that, but I can feel it. So I'm just going to slowly work to take that out. This gap will slowly start to disappear until it's 0, and then I'll start going around and then do the rest of the port. So as you can see, the space, that little lip, little canyon in there is starting to get smaller. This is only after about 5 or 10 minutes. So it is relatively efficient. And then I've done a few little ones where I go up and around there. Again, don't touch the valve seat, alright? On these heads, excuse me, on these heads, the actual valve seat where it's contacting is right here. It's the middle one, sometimes on the heads, and on the weird thing is they're all cast a little different. You know, this is again more issues of mass producing, not putting too much time and effort into really making a quality racing product, which I mean they don't need to, but at the same time, you've got this angle down here. You've got the second one, which is where it actually seats, and then on some of the heads you have this third one. So you can touch this bottom one a bit. Don't take too much off. But really make sure you don't touch this one right here. If you screw this up or you're not too confident, you can always buy a valve grinding kit off of Amazon for about 50 bucks. Alright, so as you can see, I've gotten a bit more taken down. Finally made this whole lip right here smooth. Left the outer or middle ring of the valve cutting perfectly intact. Cut into this little middle one a bit, which depending on what motor you have can affect performance, but for this one I think I'm good to go. And I'm gonna start going up in there and actually smoothing out the port. Started to do a bit, but you can see how roughed up this exhaust port is, and that just leads to extra carbon and exhaust materials getting stuck up on here and restricting airflow. So I'm just gonna go around, smooth everything out, and I'll show you in a second. More of the top of the port cleaned out, just making it smooth. And now we gotta hit the area around where that valve guide is coming out. So I'm just gonna go in from the bottom, just hit it right there and hit it right there. After about 20 minutes worth of work, you can see what I've done. It is still a bit rough, but it's definitely cleaner than what it was. Got up in there, got all the way to the end of the port, just doing basic. However, excuse me, I would like advice on what I've been doing. I hope I can improve, and I hope you guys can learn a little bit from this video. Thanks for watching. I'm gonna continue to do the rest of the cylinder head, and when we eventually get this thing put back together, once it gets back from the machine shop, I'll let you know if I feel any real performance differences. Thanks for watching. Bye.